When Wyoming's most powerful cattle baron advertises for a bride to secure his dynasty, he receives a beautiful widow whose sob story hides a darker truth. She's the wife of the rival rancher he bankrupted and drove to suicide. She came to destroy the man who destroyed her husband, but discovering her late husband's hidden betrayals changes everything. Now she must choose between the revenge she planned for years and the love she never expected with the very man she swore to hate. This is a story where vengeance becomes vulnerability, where enemies share the same betrayer, and where the greatest fortune isn't counted in cattle, but in forgiveness. Hit that like button and subscribe to witness love born from the ashes of rivalry. Billionaire rancher's widow bride is wife of business rival he destroyed years before James Sterling stood at the edge of his empire, 60,000 acres of Wyoming rangeland, stretching to the horizon where his cattle grazed like scattered coins across green felt. At 48, he owned the largest beef operation in the western states, controlled the prices at every major stockyard from Denver to Chicago, and had crushed more competitors than he could remember. But standing in his empty mansion, watching another sunset alone, he felt the hollow victory of a war won with no one to share the spoils. The letter in his hand represented his attempt at something different. Margaret Chase, 32, widowed from Kansas City. Her response to his advertisement had been eloquent in its simplicity. I understand loss, both personal and financial. I seek not wealth, but purpose, not romance, but partnership. My late husband left debts and memories. I can escape the former, but not the latter. Perhaps your ranch offers room for both rebuilding and remembering. The photograph showed a woman of striking beauty, tempered by evident sorrow. Dark blonde hair, blue eyes that held depths of experience, a face that would have been merely pretty if not for the strength written in its lines. She looked like someone who had survived storms, which in Wyoming was more important than someone who had avoided them. What James didn't know was that Margaret Chase was actually Margaret Donovan, wife of Patrick Donovan, the Irish rancher whose Canyon Creek ranch James had systematically destroyed through price manipulation, blocked loans, and stolen contracts until Patrick had put a gun in his mouth rather than face complete ruin. The train arrived at Cheyenne Station on a day when the wind carried hints of coming winter. James waited on the platform uncomfortable in his best suit, watching the disembarking passengers with the assessment of a man buying cattle, looking for good breeding, strong constitution, hidden flaws. Margaret stepped down with practiced dignity, her black traveling dress appropriate for a widow, but cut well enough to suggest she hadn't always been poor. When their eyes met, James saw a flicker of something. Recognition, hatred, quickly masked by polite composure. Mr. Sterling. Her voice was cultured, but carried an Irish lilt she couldn't quite hide. Mrs. Chase, welcome to Wyoming. She studied him with those blue eyes that seemed to measure him for a coffin. It's bigger than I expected. The station, everything, the scowl of the land, the absence of limits. That's what drew me here 30 years ago, room to build something without boundaries, or room to destroy without witnesses. The comment was sharp enough to cut, but she softened it with a sad smile. Forgive me. My husband's death has made me see shadows everywhere. How did he die, if you don't mind my asking? Badly, she said simply, and James felt an unexpected stab of something that might have been conscience. The ride to the Sterling Crown Ranch took 3 hours through landscape that alternated between harsh beauty and beautiful harshness. Margaret watched everything with careful attention, occasionally asking questions about land prices, cattle breeds, water rights. Intelligent questions that surprised him. You know ranching, he observed. My husband taught me. He believed wives should understand their husband's business. Wise man. He thought so. The bitterness in her voice was sharp as alkali water. The ranch headquarters appeared like a small city on the prairie. Main house bunkhouses, barns, corrals, all built from imported stone and local timber. It was a monument to success or excess, depending on perspective. How many cattle? Margaret asked. 40,000 head, give or take. And cowboys. 50 full-time more during drives. An army. Every empire needs one. She turned to look at him directly. Is that what this is, an empire? What else would you call it? A very expensive tombstone. Before James could respond, she had stepped down from the carriage and was walking toward the house with the confidence of someone who belonged there. or someone who had been there before in dreams of vengeance. The house staff, led by Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been with James for 20 years, greeted Margaret with careful courtesy. They were accustomed to James bringing home potential wives who never lasted more than a few weeks, driven away by his coldness or the ranch's isolation. "Your room, Senora," Mrs. Rodriguez said, leading Margaret to the suite James had prepared. "Mr. Sterling thought you would like the view." The view was spectacular. Rolling grasslands dotted with cattle, the Big Horn Mountains rising in the distance like a promise or a threat. Margaret stood at the window for a long moment, and James thought he saw her wiping tears. "It's overwhelming, I know," he said from the doorway. "It's beautiful. Beautiful things can be the cruelest." That's a strange thing to say. Is it beauty makes us want things we can't have, dream things that can't be? My husband used to say the most beautiful land was always the most expensive in blood. Your husband sounds like he was a philosopher. He was a rancher. In Wyoming, that's almost the same thing. James felt another stab of unease. "Where in Wyoming?" "South of here, small place." "You wouldn't know it." But the way she said it suggested he did. That evening they dined formally in the massive dining room that could seat 30 but usually held one. Margaret had changed into a dark blue dress that brought out her eyes and sorrow in equal measure. "Tell me about your empire, Mr. Sterling," she said, cutting her steak with precise violence. "What do you want to know? How you built it, who you stepped on, whether their ghosts keep you company at this enormous table." "That's very direct. You advertise for a wife, not an ornament. I assume you want someone who can match you. And you think you can?" "I know I can. The question is whether you can handle being matched." James found himself almost smiling. It had been years since anyone had challenged him so directly. "I built this ranch through hard work and smart business, and destroying your competition." "Competition is part of business. Is that what you call it?" Patrick Donovan might disagree. The name hit James like a physical blow. He set down his wine glass, carefully studying Margaret's face. "You knew Donovan." Everyone in this part of Wyoming knew Patrick Donovan. Irish immigrant, built Canyon Creek from nothing, had dreams of challenging the Sterling crown. Until someone destroyed him systematically, efficiently, completely. He destroyed himself, over-leveraged, underproduced, made bad decisions. Because someone blocked his loans, undercut his prices, and stole his contracts. "How would you know the details?" Margaret smiled cold as winter moonlight. "I'm very good at research, Mr. Sterling. When I decide to marry someone, I learn everything about them." "And you still came?" "Oh yes, I came specifically because of what I learned." They stared at each other across the formal table, two people recognizing that this was not the arrangement either had expected. The next days developed a strange rhythm of careful dance and subtle warfare. Margaret proved herself exceptionally capable. She reorganized the household accounts, saving thousands monthly, charmed the ranch hands with her knowledge of cattle and genuine interest in their work, and matched James in every conversation with intelligence that both attracted and unsettled him. But at night, James noticed her walking the grounds, standing in places that seemed random until he realized they were viewpoints, seeing the ranch from every angle, understanding its defenses and vulnerabilities like a general surveying a battlefield. "You're planning something," he said one evening, finding her in his study examining his business ledgers. "I'm understanding your business. Isn't that what a good wife should do?" "You're not my wife yet." "No, but I will be, won't I?" "You need respectability for your political ambitions. A governor needs a wife, especially one who understands the price of power." "How did you know about—" "Like I said, I researched thoroughly. Governor Sterling has a nice ring to it. Better than Cattle King Sterling, which is what your enemies call you." "And what do you call me?" Margaret closed the ledger and stood moving close enough that he could smell her perfume. Roses with something darker underneath. "I call you the man who destroyed everything I loved." The confession hung between them like a hangman's noose. "You're Margaret Donovan." Margaret Donovan died when she found her husband's body and their barn bankruptcy papers in one hand, pistol in the other. "Margaret." He left a note. "Want to know what it said?" James didn't, but she continued anyway. "Sterling wins. Take his offer. Save what you can. Your offer to buy Canyon Creek for a tenth its value. Your offer that required him to be dead to execute." "I didn't know he would." "Didn't you? You knew Patrick. Proud, stubborn Irish to his core, you knew he'd rather die than kneel. Then why are you here? Because I wanted to see you. To understand what kind of man could destroy another so thoroughly. To decide whether you deserve the same fate. And And I found something unexpected. You're hollow, James Sterling. You've won everything and it's given you nothing. You're already destroyed, you just don't know it yet. She turned to leave, but James caught her arm. If you hate me, why stay? Because hate and love are closer than people think. And because, she paused, struggling with the words, because I need to know something. Did you know about Patrick's debts? His real debts. To the banks, of course. No, to the Chicago syndicate, the gambling debts that started 3 years before you began your war against him. James released her arm, stunned. Gambling debts. $50,000. He'd been skimming from Canyon Creek to pay them selling cattle off the books, mortgaging land I didn't know we owned. Your economic war didn't destroy a healthy ranch. It exposed a dying one. I didn't know. I believe you, which makes this all worse somehow. You destroyed him for business, but he was already destroying himself for vice. Margaret sat down heavily in a leather chair that had cost more than most people's homes. I came here to kill you, she said conversationally. Poison, probably, or maybe an accident. Ranches are dangerous places. I had it all planned. And now I don't know. You're guilty, but not in the way I thought. Patrick was victim, but also villain. And I'm tired, James. Tired of hate, tired of plans, tired of being alone with ghosts. James poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one, and sat across from her. I know about ghosts. This ranch is full of them. Every competitor I crushed, every family I displaced, every dream I killed to build my own. I tell myself it was business, but at night. At night they visit. Yes. They drank in silence, 2 people sharing the weight of different but connected sins. Show me Canyon Creek, Margaret said suddenly. It's abandoned. Has been for 2 years. I know, but I need to see it. Need to close that chapter before I decide whether to marry you or kill you. Those are my only options. Would you prefer different ones? James considered. No, those seem appropriate. They rode out the next morning, just the 2 of them, against Margaret's protests about safety. I need no protection from you, she said, checking the rifle she carried with practiced ease. That's not what worries me. Canyon Creek Ranch was a 3-hour ride through country that grew progressively wilder. When they finally crested the ridge above it, Margaret gasped. The ranch was in ruins. Buildings collapsed, fences down the land, already returning to wilderness. But the bones of something beautiful remained. The way it nestled in the valley, the creek running through like a silver ribbon, the natural amphitheater of the surrounding hills. It was magnificent, James said quietly. You never saw it when it was alive. No, only in reports, numbers, maps. Never like this. They rode down into the valley, Margaret leading him through the ghost of her former life. The main house still stood, though windows were broken and the door hung askew. Inside, furniture remained like museum pieces under dust. Margaret stopped in what had been the parlor, touching a piano that sat under a hole in the roof. I played this the night before Patrick died. Chopin. He loved Chopin, strange for an Irish rancher. Play something now. It's probably ruined. Try. She sat at the piano, tested a few keys. Out of tune, but functional. She began to play. Not Chopin, but an Irish air, sad and beautiful and older than America itself. James stood behind her, watching her hands move across keys that had once made music in a living home. I loved him, she said when the music ended. Despite everything, the debts, the lies, the pride that killed him, I loved him. I know. How could you know? Because you're here playing his piano in his ruined house, crying for what's lost. That's love. And have you ever loved anything besides land and cattle? Once, a woman in Texas. She married my partner instead while I was building this empire. They have 6 children and a small, happy ranch. Do you regret it? Every day. And never. I couldn't have built this and loved her. I made my choice. Patrick made his choice too. Pride and gambling over honesty and help. You just gave him the excuse he was looking for. They stood in the ruined parlor, surrounded by debris and memories. There's something else, Margaret said, pulling a leather journal from her saddlebag. Patrick's real books, the ones he hid from me and the banks. James read through them, his expression darkening. The debts went deeper than Margaret had said. Patrick had been selling information about other ranchers to buyers in Chicago, betraying neighbors to feed his gambling addiction. He sold information about your operations too, Margaret pointed out. Times of cattle drives vulnerable points weaknesses. You lost that contract with the Army because Patrick told them you were overextended. That cost me a fortune, which you recouped by destroying him. But I didn't know why he was doing it. Would it have mattered? James had considered. No, but it might have changed how. They returned to Sterling Crown as the sun was setting, painting the ranch in shades of gold and blood. Neither had spoken during the ride back, each lost in recalculations of guilt and innocence. The wedding, James said as they dismounted, we should cancel it. Why, Wafa? Because you came here under false pretenses. So did you. You advertised for a wife but wanted a possession, an accessory for your political ambitions. That's different. Is it we both lied? We both had agendas. The only difference is now we know the truth. And the truth is, Margaret turned to face him fully, the sunset making her hair look like flame. The truth is Patrick is dead by his own hand. Canyon Creek is destroyed, and we're both alone with our ghosts. We can stay that way, or we can choose something different. Marry for real reasons instead of false ones. What real reasons? You need someone who understands the cost of empire. I need someone strong enough to forgive it. We both need someone who knows that love and hate are just different temperatures of the same emotion. You're suggesting we marry after everything. I'm suggesting we stop letting Patrick's ghost determine our futures. He's dead. We're not. That should mean something. That night, James found Margaret in the library reading his business journals by firelight. Learning my weaknesses, he asked. You don't have many. Operationally, you're nearly perfect. Nearly. You're expanding too fast in Montana. The water rights you're buying won't be defensible legally. James sat beside her looking at the documents she'd annotated. You really do understand the business. Patrick taught me well. Before the gambling took over, he was brilliant. You could have run Canyon Creek yourself. Not in this world. A woman rancher, I'd have been destroyed faster than Patrick was. Unless she married the biggest rancher in Wyoming. Is that a proposal? It's a proposition, a real partnership. Your intelligence and my empire. Together we could build something neither of us could alone. Impersonally, James was quiet for a moment. I'm not good at love. I chose empire over it once and built walls I don't know how to tear down. I'm not good at trust. It died with Patrick's betrayals. Then we're perfectly mismatched. Or perfectly suited. They were married 3 days later in a ceremony that was smaller than planned. Just the ranch foreman, Mrs. Rodriguez, and the local judge. Margaret wore a cream dress instead of white, acknowledging her widowhood. James wore his best suit in an expression of uncertainty that Mrs. Rodriguez had never seen before. Do you take this woman knowing her past and choosing her future? The judge asked. I do. Do you take this man forgiving his sins and sharing his empire? I do. They kissed tentative and tender, two people stepping into unknown territory. That night, sitting on the porch of the ranch house, they watched the stars emerge like scattered diamonds. I still dream about him, Margaret said. Patrick, not with love anymore, but with sadness for what he became. I dream about the men I've destroyed, including him now. Good. Conscience is what separates emperors from tyrants. And what are you? Your conscience, perhaps, or your redemption. Or just a woman who understands that sometimes the best revenge is to live well with the person you meant to destroy. You still wanted to kill me. Part of me did. Part of me might always want to, but a larger part wants to see what we could build together. Patrick destroyed himself with pride and vice. You built an empire on others' ruins. Maybe together we can build something better. Like what? I've been thinking about that. What if instead of destroying smaller ranchers, we helped them? Created cooperatives, shared resources, built the entire region instead of just our empire. That's not how business works. It's not how business has worked. But you're about to be governor. You could change the rules. James considered this woman he'd married. Enemy turned partner, destroyer. turned builder, ghost turned flesh. Patrick would hate this, he said. Us together. No, he'd understand it. He was always pragmatic under the pride. Take Sterling's offer, he wrote. Maybe he meant more than just the ranch. You think he wanted us together? I think he knew I'd need someone strong enough to handle my anger and smart enough to channel it. You're both. And you're strong enough to buy my conscience and smart enough to be my partner. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found something unexpected in the ruins of their former lives. Over the following years, the Sterling Crown Ranch became the center of a new kind of cattle empire, one built on cooperation rather than destruction. Margaret's intelligence and James's resources created a network of successful ranches that dominated the market through quality rather than monopoly. They had two children, Patrick named for the ghost they'd finally laid to rest, and Catherine named for no one's past and everyone's future. The children grew up knowing their parents' story, understanding that love could grow from the rockiest soil. When James became governor, Margaret became the power behind the throne, crafting legislation that protected small ranchers while still allowing large operations to thrive. Together, they transformed Wyoming from a battlefield of competing interests into a model of agricultural cooperation. Years later, they returned to Canyon Creek, now restored as a historical site and museum dedicated to the early days of Wyoming ranching. Standing in the parlor where Margaret had played that Irish air, she played it again on the restored piano. Any regrets? James asked. How can I regret the path that brought me here? I came for revenge and found redemption. I came to destroy and learn to build. I came as your enemy and became your salvation. And I advertised for a wife and got a conscience, a partner, and the love I thought I'd chosen against. Patrick would be laughing, Margaret said, finishing the song. Why, bon, because in the end we did take your offer, just not the way any of us expected. As they left Canyon Creek, James noticed Margaret had left something on the piano. Her original wedding ring from Patrick. A final goodbye to the past that had brought them together. Ready to go home? He asked. I've been home since the day I decided to forgive you, and myself and Patrick. Forgiveness is the only home that matters. They rode back to Sterling Crown as the sun set over their empire, not built on others' graves anymore, but on the possibility of redemption, the power of forgiveness, and the strange alchemy that could transform hate into love if given enough courage and time. The ghosts still visited sometimes, but now they came as reminders rather than accusations. Patrick Donovan's portrait hung in James's study not as a trophy, but as a reminder that every empire has a cost and the bill always comes due. But sometimes if you're very lucky, you can pay it with something better than money or blood. Sometimes you can pay it with transformation, turning rivalry into partnership, hate into love, and the worst betrayal into the best beginning.